The kitchen clock read 11:42 p.m., and the only light in the room came from the open refrigerator door, casting a long, pale shadow across the linoleum. Thomas stood on the other side of the island, silent and still. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't throwing things. He simply looked at my phone, lying face down on the marble counter, and then lifted his eyes to mine. His voice was barely a whisper, but it shattered the entire room. "Are you already gone?" I stopped breathing. My hand hovered over the granite, inches from the glass screen that held 100 lies. I wanted to lie one last time, to protect myself, to protect him, to protect whatever was left of us. But the silence between us was too heavy to carry. We were the couple everyone envied. 7 years of marriage, a house with a wraparound porch, and a rhythm that felt like a warm blanket. Thomas was an architect, steady, predictable, safe. He remembered exactly how I took my coffee and always warmed my side of the bed before I got in. I loved him. I really did. But somewhere around year 5, the warmth between us turned into routine. Our conversations shifted from dreams to grocery lists and mortgage rates. We stopped looking at each other and started looking past each other. Then my firm hired a new creative director. His name was Julian. Julian didn't ask about weekend chores. He asked about the painting I kept hidden in my closet. He noticed things. At first, it was only office chatter, shared laughs over burnt breakroom coffee, and complaints about difficult clients. I would come home and mention him casually. "Julian had a great idea for the pitch today." Thomas would nod, barely looking up from his laptop. "That's nice, honey." I told myself it was harmless. I was a married woman with a ring on my finger and a life built on solid ground. I wasn't looking for a spark. I only wanted to feel seen again. I didn't realize that being seen is the most dangerous thing in the world, because once someone looks closely, they find the cracks you've been hiding. The boundary didn't break all at once. It eroded slowly, grain by grain, until one day I realized I was standing on the wrong side of the line. It started with a late-night text on a rainy Tuesday, the kind of rain that blurred the streetlights outside my office window. I was the last one on the floor, packing up my bag, when my phone buzzed against the desk. Julian had texted, "You left your umbrella in the conference room." Again. I smiled, a real and unguarded smile. I replied, "I guess I'll have to make a run for it." His answer came immediately. "Look out the window." I walked to the glass and looked down. There he was, standing under the amber glow of a street lamp, holding my black umbrella and waving up at me. My chest tightened in a way that terrified me. I should have taken the stairs. I should have ignored it. Instead, I took the elevator down. We walked to my car in the rain, sharing the small canopy of nylon, and when his shoulder brushed mine, the heat of it seared through my damp coat. "You work too hard," he said quietly. "Someone has to," I replied. He stopped walking and turned to me. "Does he appreciate it?" The question hung in the wet air. He meant Thomas. I defended my husband. I listed Thomas's virtues, his loyalty, his kindness, but Julian only watched my mouth, not listening to the words, only watching the effort it took for me to say them. "You're very good at convincing yourself," he murmured. I got into my car and locked the doors, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I drove home in total silence, the radio off. When I walked through the front door, Thomas was asleep on the couch, the television casting blue shadows across his face. I stood over him, feeling like a stranger in my own home. I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Not physically, but in my mind, I had already left the building. After that, the secrets started stacking up. Little omissions became towering walls of deceit. I changed my phone passcode. I started taking long lunches that were really just me sitting in a parked car, watching my screen light up with Julian's name. We never touched. We never crossed the physical line. But the connection was a wildfire, burning down everything Thomas and I had built. Julian knew my fears, my childhood regrets, the dreams I had buried. Thomas knew my allergies and my mother's birthday. The guilt became a physical weight sitting on my chest every time I walked through the front door. I began waking up at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling fan cutting through the dark. Thomas would stir beside me, his hand blindly reaching out to rest on my waist, and I would freeze, my skin crawling beneath the weight of my own deceit. At dinner, I would sit there chewing tasteless food while Thomas talked about his day. I would nod and smile while my phone vibrated in my pocket against my thigh. Every buzz felt like a siren. One evening, Thomas reached across the table for the salt, and his hand brushed my wrist. I flinched. It was a tiny movement, barely a fraction of a second, but I saw his eyes register it. He pulled his hand back slowly. "Sorry," he muttered. "I'm just tired," I lied, staring down at my plate. The near catches became unbearable. I would leave my phone unlocked on the bathroom counter while showering and panic when I heard Thomas pick it up to move it away from the sink. I would stand under the scalding water, praying the screen wouldn't light up. I was living a double life, and exhaustion was hollowing me out. I started picking fights with Thomas because I needed him to become the bad guy. I needed him to yell, to be unreasonable, to give me a reason for the distance growing between us. But Thomas wouldn't fight. He only absorbed my anger, his expression growing more confused and hurt by the day. That made it worse. His kindness felt like an accusation. Then came the company retreat, 3 days in a mountain lodge. Julian and I were assigned to the same project team, and on the first night, we ended up on the patio wrapped in blankets, staring at the treeline. The air was freezing, but the space between us was electric. He reached out and tucked a stray piece of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering on my jaw. I closed my eyes and leaned into the touch, entirely ready to let my life burn to the ground. Then my phone rang. The screen lit up the dark patio. Thomas, home. I stared at the glowing letters. Julian dropped his hand and stepped back into the shadows. I answered, my voice trembling. Thomas only wanted to tell me that the neighbor's dog had gotten loose, and that he had found it because he thought I'd want to know. It was such a mundane, deeply caring reason to call. I hung up, went to my room, locked the deadbolt, sat on the edge of the bed, and cried until my ribs ached. I was destroying a good man, and I didn't know how to stop. I came home early from the retreat because I couldn't stay. I couldn't trust myself in the quiet dark with Julian. When I walked into the house, the silence felt different. It was not the comfortable quiet of our early years. It was the heavy, suffocating quiet of a held breath. Thomas was sitting at the kitchen island. No television. No laptop. Just him, a cold cup of coffee, and pale moonlight spilling through the blinds. He didn't ask why I was home a day early. He didn't ask about the retreat. He only watched me set my bag down. I braced myself for accusations. I prepared my defensive lies, angry deflections, and rehearsed excuses. But Thomas didn't raise his voice. He looked at me with a devastation so pure it stripped the air from my lungs. "I found the old iPad," he said softly. My blood turned to ice. The iPad I used for sketching. The one synced to my cloud messages. The one I had forgotten existed. I gripped the edge of the counter, waiting for rage, but instead he looked down at his hands and then back up at me. "Are you already gone?" There it was, the brave question. Not who is he? Not how long? Just a plea for the truth, no matter how much it would destroy him. I could have lied. I could have said Julian was just a work friend, and that it meant nothing. But looking into Thomas's shattered eyes, the lies turned to ash in my throat. "I don't know," I whisper. A tear slipped down Thomas's cheek, and he didn't wipe it away. "I need you to know," I choked out, stepping toward him. "Nothing physical happened. I swear to you, Thomas. Nothing happened." He let out a hollow, broken laugh. "You think that makes it better?" The words hit me like a physical blow. "If he had touched you, it would be a mistake," Thomas said, his voice cracking. "But you gave him your mind. You gave him the parts of you that belonged to me. You let me sit here, day after day, thinking I was enough, while you were living a whole other life in your head." I fell to my knees on the hard linoleum. The ugly, jagged truth lay bare under the harsh kitchen lights. He was right. The betrayal wasn't in a cheap hotel room. It was in the smiles I hid, the texts I deleted, and the secret world I built with another man while my husband slept beside me. Thomas stood up and walked past me, his footsteps heavy and slow in the hallway. The guest room door clicked shut, And that sound was louder than any scream. The next few weeks were a blur of agonizing, polite distance. We moved around each other like ghosts haunting the same house. Every room became a museum of our failures, every corner holding a memory I had tainted. I would watch Thomas water the porch plants, his shoulders slumped under the weight of grief I had handed him. I blocked Julian's number. I quit my job. I tore the weed out by the roots, but the garden was already dead. I tried to apologize, but the words felt cheap and inadequate. How do you apologize for making someone feel invisible in their own marriage? Thomas stopped asking about my day. He stopped warming my side of the bed. The punishment wasn't anger. The punishment was his withdrawal. I was losing him in slow motion, and it was entirely my fault. It has been 2 years since that night in the kitchen. We didn't divorce, but we didn't simply forgive and forget either. We had to burn the old marriage down to the studs and build something entirely new from the ashes. It required brutal, agonizing honesty that stripped us both raw. There were nights when I packed my bags, convinced my guilt was a poison Thomas shouldn't have to swallow, but he would stand in the doorway and ask me to stay. Not out of obligation, but out of stubborn, painful hope. We go to counseling. We talk until our voices give out. The trust is back, but it is different now. It is not the blind, naive trust of our 20s. It is scarred, battle-tested trust. It is a choice we make every single morning, knowing exactly how fragile it really is. I look at Thomas differently now. I see the strength it took for him to ask that question and the grace it took for him to stay. I don't deserve him, but I spend every day trying to earn him. Sometimes, when it rains, I watch the water streak down the kitchen window and remember that the hardest part of waking up from a dream is realizing you were the nightmare.